I'm very grateful to the sponsors of this evening's Tikun Leil Hoshana Raba. We thank Saul and Zina Borg, who dedicate this evening's learning to Ilui Nishmas, Saul's mother, Leah Bas Shlomo Zev Cohen. And we thank Yitzi and Terry Karasik, who honor Yitzi's father, Mark Karasik, on the occasion of his birthday, and we wish him good health and nachas together with Mrs. Karasik and their entire family. We thank Yaakov and Robin Geffner, who sponsored this evening's shir in memory of Robin's father, his upcoming year being his first yortzeit, Ephraim Leib ben Yitzchak, and the Shom Shefen Aliyah. We thank Sam and Leah Levi, who sponsored this evening with Uli Nishmas HaChover Rafal ben HaChover Yudah Levi Zal. And we thank David and Margie Sachs, who sponsor in memory of David's grandmother, Gladys Newsetter and Shabili Uli Nishmasa. And
well, of course, it was the number one.
We ask and we thank our anonymous sponsor who asked that the learning I have the honor right now of asking, this is a common COVID request that everybody on Zoom
I only get it through my WhatsApp.
Oh, okay. No, I was unmuted. So I guess this evening for teaching us and making our Leil Hoshana Raba as attractive and as full of learning and as exciting as it has been over the years. I learned this year in one of the svarim that when we say a piska tava, so one of the interpretations of a piska is a shliach. The Baruch Hu has gave us a din, all the tov, but there's many, many shlichim. So we ask the Baruch Hu that all the shlichim should be benevolent and good shlichim. We're very grateful that we have a shliach to teach us Torah this evening, and the shliach who models for us what it means to be Misorei Yisrael, one of the princes of Klal Yisrael. And over the years, we've had the opportunities to learn in these few moments of introduction from Rabbi Schacter's dedication to the study of Torah, his scholarship, his giving Klal Yisrael, Yaakov Emden's Svarim, and the countless monographs of scholarship that so many of us learn from, and sometimes not even aware that people who are giving Shurim are really learning from his monographs. But over the course of the year, I've had the opportunity to see another angle of Rabbi Schacter, and that is the sense of achrayus that he has, the Baal achrayus. That I always knew that there are many of the Talmidim in yeshiva, long after leaving yeshiva, that take counsel in communal issues, in career issues with Rabbi Schacter. It's always with great gravitas. There's always meetings and research and understanding. But I myself saw it firsthand when there was an issue in the community that I was involved in, and Rabbi Schacter thought that I could handle it better. And he took the initiative to call me up and that we should meet. And I'm always grateful when somebody has that sense of concern and the dedication to Klal Yisrael, to insert themselves. Very often we don't insert ourselves. Very often we wait till people ask us to get involved. When a person feels a sense of achrayus for Klal Yisrael, then they insert themselves and they step up to the plate. And even if it may be an uncomfortable situation, but this is what the Klal needs. I was I am very grateful not only for that opportunity, but to be able to see what it means to be a Baal Achrayas. And it's with even greater covet that I present to you, Rabbi Schacter, for this Tikun Leil Hoshana Raba.
Good evening. Good evening to all of you. B'Shus Marda Asra. I'm beginning to think that the reason I keep on coming back every year is to hear such divrei shevach that make me actually very uncomfortable. So I'm very grateful to you as I always am. And even though it's a shtickle guzma, but it means a lot. And I know that were my parents sitting here, they would be particularly grateful and would actually maybe even believe half of what it is that you said. I want to thank the sponsors. I want to thank Rabbi Ross for being the shadchan every year, making sure that everything works very, very well. Last year we were on Zoom. This year we're also a shtickle on Zoom, but we're actually here together. Those of us who are here together. I don't think for a second we should take this for granted. This is an incredible achievement. And in Mirz Hashem, it should be Meisef Ha'ilach. We should be able to get together without any concern over these got a relatively further short period of time. I want to thank Rabbi Neuberger not only for the introduction, but for everything that he does for the entire community. You're all blessed knowing firsthand the daily ongoing contact that he has with you and the impact that he has on you. But as you heard, and as you know, I'm sure from many different contexts, your Marda Asra is looked towards to tackle very serious, major community, communal-wide issues that transcend the specifics of this tzibur, of this makom tefillah, of this Beis HaKnesses. And we are blessed. We are blessed in our community and the Bergenfield Teaneck community to have somebody like Rabbi Neuberger who has the wisdom and has the insight and has the knowledge and has the ichpatiyut, segetaman. When people come to him, he understands that even though he would prefer to spend his time, I'm sure, learning and spending time with his family and his talmidim, but being a Manig Yisrael muns someone. It takes an achrayus. And so we thank you, Rabbi Neuberger, on the entire community's behalf, on behalf of your shul, and for us personally, on behalf of our family, our immediate family, for everything that you do. Kadosh Baruch Hu should give you continue the koach. I used to say that we're getting younger. I don't even say anymore that we're getting younger. I'm not getting younger. You're getting younger. You should have koach and Mirz Hashem to continue for many years. I hope everybody has a copy of the handout. Anybody not have a copy of the handout? If you don't have a copy, please sit next to somebody who does have a copy of the handout. Okay, let me learn in Ashtika Gemara. Sukkah Daf Lametes Amid Aleph, which is based on the Mishnah in Sukkah Daf Lamed Ches Amid Aleph. The Mishnah says, Makam Shenagu, on the bottom of Lamed Ches Amid Aleph, that there are certain things that are tolui that depend on minhag. And one of them is levarech yavarech. If there's a custom to make a bracha, you make a bracha. Says the Gemara. Now let's take a look on page 1. Levarech yavarech. It's about almost halfway down. Rabbi leishanu elo la'achrav. What kind of a bracha are we talking about? We're talking about the after bracha. We're talking here about Hallel, and the after bracha is Yahalalucha Hashem Elokeinu, the last paragraph of Hallel, which ends with a bracha. So Abaye says that the bracha that is contingent upon the particular custom is only relevant to the end bracha. Only la'achrav, aval lefonav, but before mitzvah levarech. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, kol mitzvos kulan, Mevarech Aleihen over LiAsiyatan. That's the topic of the discussion this evening. Every time with a bracha. And the birchas hamitzvah that we know that we make in the context of a ma'aseh hamitzvah, it must be done over LiAsiyatan. And the Gemara goes on to prove that the word over means before. However, the Gemara proves it. The principle is whenever it comes to mitzvos, the bracha, the birchas hamitzvah has to come before. Now, this principle is problematic, particularly in the Yom Tov of Sukkot. And I want to focus on how this plays itself out on the Yom Tov of Sukkot, and then I want to extrapolate from the issues that we're going to be analyzing. What is the nature of a birchas hamitzvah? What is the function of a birchas hamitzvah? How do we touch up? What is it supposed to accomplish? A birchas hamitzvah. So we have a problem. Let's start with lulav. There are two mitzvos saseh when it comes to sukkos. One is arba minim, and one is yeshiva sukkah. Let's start with lulav. The top of the next page, the Gemara says in Psachim, and it's also on Daf Mem Beis a little bit later on in Masaches Sukkah. The Gemara there is a very interesting Gemara. The bottom line relevant to us is Shani Hasan de Beidna de Agbe Nafakbe. When it comes to the Arba Minim, the Agbe Nafakbe, which means that as soon as I pick it up, I've already fulfilled the mitzvah. The mitzvah is bin rega, it takes a split second. I pick it up, mid'ag behe. Interesting, we'll come back to this lashon. Mid'ag behe nafakbe. It's in my hands. I've already fulfilled the obligation. And so the question, go back to Tosfos on Daf Lamed Tes on page 1. Tosfos asks, how could you be Makayim over LiAsiyatan in the context of Netilas Lulav? Mitam zeh dibra maschil over LiAsiyatan. Mitam zeh tzorich levarech halulav kodem sheyitlenu. You have to make the bracha before you take it. In other words, it's on the table, it's in front of you, you're looking at it. That's when you make the bracha. The ila achar shenatlo, if you're going to make the bracha while you're holding it, it's already too late. Mida'ag be nafak be. Kedarmina b'sof pirkin. It's in Sukkah Membeis. We saw it in Psachim. It's too late. I have to do it before I do the Ma'aseh Mitzvah. It has to be before I pick it up. Memela, it has to be on the table. I haven't picked it up yet. Tosfos says, no, it can't be. Umil lo mistavra klal. Tehech yivarech alav v'hu munach b'kli. Too much time. I have to bend over. I have to take it. It's in the kashakol. It's in the zegalach. It's in the zachala. The thing. So I got to open it up, and it's too much of a hefsek. It's too much of a gap between the bracha and the actual fulfillment of the mitzvah itself. And he brings a raya from the Gemara Menachos when it comes to tefillin. V'chol sha'ah. 2 lines later, she'ena mitzvah mizumenes biyado lasos lo mistaver klal levarech alav. It has to be ready for me to do. Well, if it's on the table, it's considered to be too far away. It's not yet mizumenes, and so therefore it's not shayach that I should make the bracha at that time. So now I have a problem. So elamai, I have to pick it up, but if I pick it up, it's already too late. Mid'ag be, nafak be, how am I mekayim over LiAsiyatan? Tosfos gives 4 answers. V'shem litol lulav kodem sheyitol ha'esrog mevarech. You just pick up the lulav, and by lulav means also the adasim and the arovas. So I'm on the way. The esrog is still on the table. over LiAsiyatan, not fulfilled this. I didn't do anything yet. I didn't is not counting at all, but I'm closer. It's not lying there on the table. At least I have this already in my hand, and the esrog is still there. Inami, second answer. La'achar shenotel shnehem, you make the bracha after you pick them both up. Ela shahofech echad mehen, one of them is upside down. So that's the one that we're probably most familiar with. For some reason, we don't turn the lulav upside down. We could have turned the lulav upside down. We don't turn the lulav upside down. We turn the esrog upside down. Kedarmina b'sof pirkin. The ein yotze b'mitzvahs ela derech gedei losan. I have to hold it to be mekayim the mitzvah of netilas lulav esrog hadasim and aravos. It has to be the way it grows. If it's upside down, again, I haven't done anything, but at least now I'm a nanosecond away. I'm holding it, but it's upside down. So now I make the bracha, and all I have to do is flip it, and then I'm mekayim over LiAsiyatan. Number 3, few lines down. Efsher sheyischavein shelo lotzes bo ad achar bracha. There's a kavana shelo lotzes. Ta'afal gav damrina mitzvos einon tzrichos kavana. Massive sugya. Even though normally you don't have to have kavana to be mekayim a mitzvah, and that itself requires a definition. What does that mean? But if you have specific intention not to fulfill the mitzvah, then Tosfos says maybe that works. So you pick it up, you hold it regularly, but you have in mind that by this act, I'm not being mekayim the mitzvah, and I'm gonna be mekayim the mitzvah after I make the bracha. Now comes the last one, and the last one is the most intriguing, and that's the one that's gonna occupy us significantly. Inami, the last of the narrow lines. Mishum de lo gomra mitzvaso ad achar ni'anua. Because we're not mekayim fully the mitzvah mida'agbe nafakbe, mida'agbe hascholasa nafakbe, because it's last. The mitzvah of netilas lulav lasts, because you're not mekayim the gemar mitzvah, you're not done until the nanuim. For example, the Mehai Taima Nami Mevarech Anetilas Yodayim Achar Netila. When do we make the bracha of Al Netilas Yodayim? After we Notel Yodayim, after we wash our hands. Why? The Lo Gamar Mitzvah Achar Niguv. It's actually important to realize that wiping your hands is actually part of the mitzvah of Netilas Yodayim, which means you should remember that don't make the bracha very quickly, and then don't finish wiping your hands before you make the bracha or during the bracha. You have to leave a shtikala hand wiping after the end of the bracha, because the bracha should be chal on the niguv or on a piece of the niguv. So there it's a mitzvah that lasts a while. It's not gomer until the niguv. So here too, it's not gomer until the nanuim. And then he says it's really not 100%. Umil lo domi kulehai, the neanua eno ela machshire mitzvah ba'alma velo ma'akev. That it's really not true that nanuim is a part of the mitzvah. It's a machshire mitzvah. It's a Talmudic principle. It's a Gemara Maseches Yuma about the Kohen Gadol the night before. It sets up the Ketores to prepare. It's ancillary to, it's a section of, it's related to, it's an extension of, but it's not considered a full part of the mitzvah. So therefore the Tzustel Tosfos wonders whether in fact it is fair and whether it is legitimate. And just look all the way at the bottom of Tosfos, Umishenotal, the end of the last, next to the last wide line, Umishenotal avra kvar ikar mitzvah. So you still have a machshire mitzvah, but the ikar mitzvah is done. So maybe that's not really such a good idea. So maybe one of the other options are considered to be more plausible. If you turn to page 2, Tosfos Psachim also asks this question. Tosfos Psachim, where the Gemara said, where we saw the principle of once you pick up a lulav, mida'agbe nafagbe, Tosfos be'idna da'agbe nafagbe, the third Tosfos on the top of page 2, Vim Tomar kiven de nafek, hech yivorech, v'halo tzarech levarech over LiAsiyatan. Omeri afal gav de nafek, ate osek b'mitzvah. Shetzorech l'nanea b'kriyas hala. So it's interesting that the 4 answers in Maseches Sukkah that nanuim is locked into, is a chelek of the mitzvah of netilas lulav. And here's an important principle. What does over LiAsiyatan mean? It does not mean I need to do it before I begin. It means I need to do it before I end. As long as I'm in the middle of doing it, and what I'm doing is a part of the mitzvah, that is a kiyum and over LiAsiyatan. So I'm going to repeat that again because this we're going to see is a major machlekes Rambam and others. Over LiAsiyatan, according to this, means over ligmar asiyasa. It does not mean over lahascholas asiyasa. I'm in the middle. I'm in the middle, but I'm not done yet. I still have nanuim to do. I'm in the middle of nanuim. It's good enough. I can make the bracha, even though I've been already, the train has left the station already a little bit, but it's still over LiAsiyatan as long as there is a gemar mitzvah that still is left to be done. Now, this principle of mida'agbe nofakbe leads to very interesting conclusions. I want to draw to your attention on the page 2 to a Rashash in Sukkah and to a Bikurei Yaakov. So the Rashash has an interesting chiddush in response to a question of Rabbi Kiveger. The question of Rabbi Kiveger is not for now. On the sugya, Rabbi Kiveger asks a question in the Drush v'Chiddush. Ulanias daiti in the middle of page 2, towards the end of the second line. Mida'ag behe, says the Rashash, lav dafka, ela misha'a shenotlo biyodo lahagbiyo. Av shelo okro adayin nafigde. Mida'ag behe doesn't mean lift it up. It means hold it. So if it's on the table and you're holding it, you bent over and you're holding it, the Rashash says that is considered already that I'm yotzei the mitzvah. I don't have to elevate it. I have to hold on to it. Mida'agbe is lav dafka. Agbe means to elevate, to pick up. No, it doesn't mean that. It means I have to hold it. As long as I'm holding it, it's good enough. And I found, as I was working through the sugya, I found this really interesting Bikurei Yaakov that I hadn't seen before. Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger was one of the great German Rabbanim in the middle of the 19th century. He was a Rav in Altona in Germany. He was a shtickle ufgeklärt. He was a huge, massive Talmud Chacham, the Aruch Lener, and more. So he has a sefer, Bikurei Yaakov. He named it Yaakov. His name was Yaakov, on Inyanei Sukkos, a whole sefer on Inyanei Sukkos. And now we come to the following. Nistapakti, third line. And it never occurred to me before this suffix until I saw it in the last week or two. Nistapakti. Misha nota lulav kodem alosa shachar, va'adayin hu biyodo ad achar netzachad. So I lifted it up in the middle of the night, and I'm hanging on for dear life, and I'm holding it, and now it's already netzachama, va'achar kachi nicho miyodo. And then, for whatever reason, you put it down. What's the nistapakti? Im tzarech shuv lachzor v'litlo. You have to pick it up again. What are the two tzadim? Im nomar shehalekicha hi mitzvah. If the mitzvah is you have to take it. If that's the case, v'lachein be'inon halekicha dafka. Lulav, it begins in the morning. It begins, we're going to use his terminology. It begins with Netzachama, but I picked it up before Netzachama. So I wasn't Yotze. Because if the Maisa HaMitzvah is the picking up, then the picking up has to be done b'shas the zman of the mitzvah. So if I picked it up beforehand, and now I'm holding it, I'm not Yotze. I actually have to put it down and pick it up again in order to fulfill the mitzvah. Oh, Neymar, maybe no. Maybe the mitzvah lekicha rak sheyihye biyada doesn't mean, right, the shades of the Rashash. It doesn't mean you have to lift it up. It means you have to be holding it. So now it becomes the Netzachama, and it's biyadi. I'm holding it. So that's good enough. So that's the question. He wants to know what to do. He goes back and forth, and he concludes at the bottom, Ela al korchach diyatza, the lakicha mikri kozman shehu biyad. Very much like the Rashash. It's not a din in picking up. It's a din in holding. It's a din in holding. So the Rashash talks about if you held it before you picked it up. The Bikurei Yaakov talks about if you held it after you picked it up. But in each case, given the scenario, mid'agbe, nofakbe, very interesting, and I would say pretty surprising and unusual. It's not what it sounds like. It's not what it seems like. It's not what it says. Doesn't mean mid'agbe. It means you're holding on to it. Netilas lulav. Doesn't say hagboas halulav. Netilas lulav means I'm taking it. Doesn't mean that I'm lifting it. So the Rashash says that if I'm holding it, I'm already Yotze. And the Bikurei Yaakov says that if I'm holding it after the Zman Chiyuv, even though I lifted it before, but it doesn't really matter. Al Kopanim, now let's get back to the issue of over LiAsiyatan. So now, whatever mid'agbe nofakbe is, we have a problem because it happens right away. Either I'm holding on to it or I'm lifting it, but in a second it's over. So for Taisus, what do we do when it comes to lulav? Taisus gives 4 answers. Taisus Simsachim gives the answer of Nanuim. And the principle is that we're going to come shortly to a term, mitzvah nimsheches. It is an ongoing mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah that is fulfilled immediately. So I can be mekayim over LiAsiyatan as long as after I make the bracha, there's still a piece of the mitzvah that is still going on. Does not mean before the beginning of the mitzvah. It means while the mitzvah is going on, as long as there's a shtika l'kiyuv of a mitzvah after I make the bracha, so the bracha is chal over LiAsiyatan, it's good enough. If you look at the Ran on page 3, the Ran in Sukkah, so the Ran has the same discussion, and the Ran uses yet another term. We saw the term in Taisus that nanuim are machshirei mitzvah, and then he said it's really machshirei mitzvah, but it's not really a chelik of the mitzvah. We saw Taisus in Psachim that did consider nanuim to be akati osek b'mitzvah shetzarech l'naneya. And now we come to the Rabbeinu Nis. The Ran at the end of Lulav HaGozel quotes this Gemara and asks the question in the second line, Umid Parchinon, Kivin da Agbe Nafakbe. So what are we going to do? After all, we're going to be Mekayim the mitzvah before we have a chance to make the bracha. The last word of the long lines, V'yesh, now the narrow lines, V'yesh Alamdu Mikan, Shetzarech Levarech Al Halulav Ba'odo B'kli. Lefisha kala mitzvos kulan mevarech aleim over LiAsiyatan. V'im mevarech alei basar da'agbe ein zeh over LiAsiyatan. So he toys with the suggestion that Tosfos first toyed with, namely it's on the table. I haven't touched it yet. Whatever mid'agbe means, whether it means lifted or it means touching, I haven't gotten there yet. So I'm mekayim over LiAsiyatan. But he says no. It's considered to be munach bekli. He rejects it for the same reason that Taisus rejects it. And then va'acherim omrim Shenot lo shelo kederech gedilasa. So he has another famous answer. Well, you take it and you do it upside down. Can only be mekayim if you do it derech gedilasa, so it doesn't count. Then all the way at the end, the last couple of lines, v'lo tikshilon hoda amrina and shekala mitzvos kulam mevarech aleim over LiAsiyatan. So the Ran concludes, Dachinami, afal gaf demidaag bein nafak afilu hachi, and the terminology here is very precise and interesting. Afilu hachi adayin yesh kan shiore mitzvah shetzarech lenano. There's a shtickle of shirayim. If you're a chassid, you know what shirayim are. There's a lot of sanctity in the shirayim from the Rebbe. The Rebbe has leftovers, but it's not just leftovers. It's a chelik of the mitzvah. Shiurei mitzvah is not Tosfos is machshirei mitzvah, but he's considering it to be part of the mitzvah, an extension of the mitzvah, involved with the mitzvah, and therefore hilkach shapi mikri over LiAsiyatan. Shelo bo l'mayit, what does the principle of making a bracha over LiAsiyatan come to exclude? Elo she'ein gomrin es ha-mitzvah kula kodem sheyivarech halah. You can't finish it and then, oh my God, I'm done. I forgot to make a bracha. I make a bracha now. So that's not an option. But as long as you're in the middle, that is considered to be good enough. So this is the shitas that we've seen so far, that there is this substantial Rishonim position that over LiAsiyatan means while it's going on, as long as I haven't finished yet. Before I finished is considered to be over LiAsiyatan. In terms of what mida'ag be'hei nafak be'hei, so we saw an interesting chiddush from the Rashash and the Bikurei Yaakov about, does it mean mamish picking or does it mean holding? But regardless, if na'anuim is part of the mitzvah, so you can fulfill over LiAsiyatan even after you picked it up, because you still have a way to go. Which brings us, of course, to the Rambam. The bottom of page 3. Zogt the Heilige Rambam in Hilchas Lulav, Perek Zayin Halacha Tes. So we're trained already to read every word. We're very careful. Mi sheyagbiya arba minin elu. Once you raise up these 4 minim, parenthesis, bein sheyagbiyan ke'achas, bein b'zeh chazeh, bein b'yamin, bein b'smol, yatsa. Mishayigbiya yatsa. The Gemara Mefureshes mida'ag bei nafag bei. V'hu sheyagvihan derech gedilasa. You're only yotze if you hold it in the manner in which they grow. That's the way it has to be, from bottom to top. Avol shelo kederech gedilasa lo yatsa. U'mitzvah kihilchasa. What is the mitzvah? It's an interesting, for me, it would have been good if the Rambam would have just said mitzvah. Like, I actually am not sure what he means. Mitzvah is like the real super serious halachic mitzvah, as opposed to stama mitzvah. I don't know exactly. I'm still trying to figure that out. But it means that the kiyum ha-mitzvah, mitzvah kihil chasa. How are you mekayim the mitzvah of lulav, of arba minim? Sheyagbia aguda shel shlosha minin biyamin, ve'esro b'smol, ve'yolich ve'yavi ve'yale ve'yored ve'yananea halulav shalosh pa'amim b'chol ruach uruach. What is the mitzvah? What consists of the mitzvah of taking arba minim? U'mitzvah kihil chasa, you want to do it right, is to lift up this cluster and the yolech v'yavi v'yale v'yored v'yananea. What's the Rambam say? The Rambam says 3 things here, first of all, meda'ag be'en nafak. When you lift it up, that's when you fulfill the mitzvah. Number 2, the Rambam says that na'anuim is a chelik of the mitzvah. The Rambam says, what's the mitzvah kehilchasa? You lift it up and you shake it. The Rambam includes v'yolich, v'yov, v'yovi, v'yale, v'yored, v'yananea. That's part of the mitzvah kehilchasa. It's a mitzvah nimsheches. We're not done, finished. Pick it up, done, finished, done. No. Nanuim is a part of the mitzvah. And number three, parenthetically, I saw this once and only once in my life. I'm sure you've seen this more often. What do we do the nanuim with? Lefishita saramba. V'yolich, v'yolich, v'yovi, v'yale, v'yorid, v'yananea. What? What's the next word? What's the next word? Halulav, shalosh pam. So when I was living in Boston, I had a teacher, Professor Tversky. He was my teacher in graduate school, and he was the Tikun Rebbe. And I would go daven every morning with him to try to help him make a minyan and to try to better my grades if I would go daven with him. And on Sukkot, he did nanuim just with the lulav. You've seen this? He held the esrog right here, and he does the nanuim just with the lulav. As the state in Ramba, the Beferish Rambam. I don't know if any of you have seen it. When I first saw it, I was like, it was very odd to me. I'd never seen it. I was already my early 20s. I'd been around the block of shtickle. The state in Rambam, v'yananea halulav shloshapa. Now, nanuim is considered to be part of the mitzvah. Now, if nanuim is part of the mitzvah, I want to bring to your attention two very interesting corollaries. If you look at the top of page 4. So Sternbuch in the Moadim Uzmanim quotes from Rav Velvel, agrees with, which is a Chiddush. Binyan Ne'anuim. Chiddush more on top right, page 4. Let's first settle the issue about Nanuim being part of the mitzvah. So we're going to call it Shiorei mitzvah in the Lashon of the Ran. We're going to call it mitzvah nimsheches. It's one long mitzvah. Chiddush more on Agaon. Rabbi Yitzchak Zev Soloveitchik, Agaon of Bez and the Riskarov was Machadish Davar Chadash. The Me'ach Hashem before Barambam Perek Zayin the Lulav Alacha test quote, and we just read it. Umitzvah kilchos shiag biaguda shel shalosh minim biyamin. Ve'esrog b'smol. V'yolech v'yavi v'yala v'yored v'yananei halulav shalosh b'ama b'chol ruach u'ruach hayin sham arei muvor. Shemitzvahs nanuim shayach l'netila. The rak bozeh miskayim hamitzvah the netilas lulav kilchosa. I'm not done when I just lift it up. I have to finish the mitzvah by doing the nanuim. If that's the case, zogt the griz a chiddush, v'chein chiddush moran zatzal, shetzrichim ledaktek, lena'anea dafka oso lulav ve'esrog shenatal mitzvah. Right, you can't go and make a bracha on your lulav and esrog, and then you go home, or you stay home, you did it early, we'll come to that in a second. Then you come to shul, I left it at home, so you're going to borrow somebody else's lulav and esrog to do the nanuim. No, says Rav Velvel, it's not an option. You have to do, it's one mitzvah. You have to be mekayim the mitzvah with the cheftza shel mitzvah that you used to begin the mitzvah. Shetzrichim ledaktek lenanea dafka oso lulav ve'esrog shenatal mitzvah shebozeh levad b'skayim hamitzvah the netila kehilchos. Lefizeh b'nanuim dahalel nami tzrichim lenanea belulav sheyatza bo dafka. Because the Rambam continues and says that part of nanuim is not just to do the nanuim after you make the bracha, but part of the nanuim of Hallel are part of the mitzvah of netilas lulav. So that lulav and esrog also has to be the same. So that's chiddush number 1. The implication of nanuim being part of the maisa hamitzvah of netilas lulav means you have to be consistent and take the same object all the way through. The second is Rav Schacter in the Nefesh Harav deals with an issue that I've been dealing with my whole life. I'm sure you have as well. I used to think that there was a hidur in the morning before I went to shul. I'd go into my sukkah, and I would be mekayim. There's a hidur before Shachris. I do the tilas lulav. I do it in the sukkah, and I'd be mekayim the mitzvah, and I would take it upside down and put it and fix it and shake it and do the nanuim, and then I'm off to shul. And I felt very proud. Got up an extra few minutes, went into the sukkah. It's like a hidur. And turns out, according to Rabbi Soloveitcher, so Rav Schacter says the following: Rabbeinu, top left page, for another implication of the fact that the nanuim are part of the mitzvah. Rabbeinu Amar b'shiurav shu medakdek b'dafka shelo l'kaya mitzvah lulav kaidem matfila ad shah asmucha la'miras halel. The right time, according to Rabbi Soloveitcher, is don't get up early. I mean, get up early anyway, but get to shul on time. Hold on, keep it there. And then before Hallel is when you properly and appropriately fulfill the mitzvah of Arba Minim. The Ladas Taisis, it's a kiyum in Hallel. And according to the Rambam, as we've seen, hey mahavim kiyum b'mitzvahs netilas lulav. The nanuim during Hallel is a culmination, is a function, is part and parcel of the mitzvah of netilas lulav. I get up and I go into the sukkah and I'm mekayim my mitzvah, and then I go to shul, and then what happens is so I put it down, I daven Psuki the Zimra, I daven Shmona Esrei, and now I'm ready to say Hallel, I'll pick it up again. Ein kan siruf ben shtei hanetilos. The mida'ag be'en nofak be. Uledas harambam hareti shor hamitzvah chasero paguma. Because I didn't do the nanuim of Hallel. So according to Rabbi Soloveitcher, the fact that nanuim l'fishitas harambam is part and parcel of the taking of the lulav of the Arba Mina means you make the bracha right before Hallel, you do the nanuim, it's in your hand, you're good to go, and that's all the chelik of the mitzvah. So we have now two implications. We saw two implications of what mid'ag be, nafak be, with the Rashash and the Bikurei Yaakov. Now we have two implications of what it means that the nanuim, according to this opinion, is mamish a chelik of the mitzvah of netilas lulav. Number one is you have to make sure you have the same set. And number two, the closer to Hallel, the more appropriate. Now that we know that according to the Rambam, lulav is a mitzvah nimshaches, shiorei mitzvah fenanuim. How does the Rambam paskin when it comes to over LiAsiyatan b'lulav? Says the Rambam as follows. The bottom, in the middle of the page. Hilchas lulav perek zayin halacha vav. 2 lines from the bottom of the middle section. Mitzvah menamufchar le'egod lulav v'hadas v'arava v'la'asos shloshton aguda achas. So in one cluster we have the lulav and the hadas and the arava. Now ukeshehu notlam lotzeis bohen. Mevarech tchila al netilas lulav. Kishehu notlav. When the person takes them to fulfill their biblical obligation, one first makes the bracha al netilas lulav. And then he explains why dafka that bracha, what happened to the esrog. The achar kach notel ho aguda hazos biyamino, the esrog bismolo, v'notlon derech gedilas. What does the Rambam say? That you make the bracha for the Arba Minim before you pick it up. Before you pick it up. I'm going to read it again. Ukeshahu notla. I would now translate it, and when one is about to notlam, lotzeis bohen, mevarech tchila, one first makes the bracha val netilas lulav, and here to me is pretty clear, va'achar kach notel aguda hazos biyamino ve'esrog b'smol. The Hagos Maimunios at the top of page 5 operates with this sheet of the Rambam. So the Rambam would appear to say, before I take it in my hand, not option number 1 in Taisus, not option number 2 in Taisus, not option number 3 in Taisus, not option number 4 in Taisus, the pre-1A option in Taisus that Taisus rejected. It's sitting on the table. Before I take it in my hand, before I put my hand on it, that's when I make the bracha, and then I take it. Zogt the Hagos Maimunios at the top of the page. I'm sorry, it's so small. The older I get, the smaller the letters. It used to not be so small, but then it got small, and I should have enlarged it, but you'll be meichel me, I hope. Avo Rashbam Omer, top of the page 5. She'ein levarech kodem she'et lenu, the mechzik ki chucha v'tlu. Chucha v'tlu is a very sharp formulation. It's like a joke. It's like ridiculous. And I assume what he means is the issue that Tosfos had, that it's too much going on between the time I make the bracha and I'm mekayim the mitzvah. Ella yitlenu v'hacha v'havashaper over LiAsiyatan kiven she'ikar mitzvaso ikar mitzvaso she'ikar mitzvaso hu hananua b'shas tal. Now we're ratcheting it up, the significance of nanuim. It's not a shiurim mitzvah. It's not a shtickle of the mitzvah. It's not a part of the mitzvah. Ikar mitzvah. The ikar mitzvah of netilas lulav is the nanua. And kedisa beperak lulav agozel. Inami, another option is like Tosfos say, yachavin shelo lotzes. It's another option. Or another option is Rabbeinu Tam Haya Omer Litlan Shalo Kederach Gedilasan. Another option. Don't give me this business that you have to take it, that you have to make the bracha before you take it. Can't be. I have other ways to solve my over LiAsiyatan problem. Rabbeinu Simcha Kosav, the Hagos Maimunios quotes Rabbeinu Simcha about 4 lines down. Shekol Zman She'adam Asuk b'mitzvah Mevarech b'tov. It's okay, it's fine to make the blessing as long as you are involved in the mitzvah. Umikri over LiAsiyatan. V'lo asi over LiAsiya elo la'afuke shelo yivarech achar asiyasa. But as long as I'm involved with it, it's good enough. I'm involved with it because nanuim is at the very least part of the mitzvah, at the very most, even striking formulation, the ikar hamitzvah. Meichel the ikar hamitzvah. It's part of the mitzvah. So there's still mitzvah behavior going on after the bracha, so that, okay, that's good enough. The Rambam disagrees. The Rambam says it's not going to help me, because you remember the Rambam also held that nanuim is a chelek of the mitzvah of netilas lulav. But the Rambam says it's not going to help me, because for me, over LiAsiyatan doesn't mean before I'm done. Over LiAsiyatan means before I begin. So we have now machlokes, Rabbeinu Simcha, let's say on the one side, the Ran on one side, the fourth answer of Tosfos on one side. Maybe nanuim is good enough to help me recognize that I still have a mitzvah act going on, and therefore it could be considered over LiAsiyatan. The Shitas HaRambam akchenzach, estelzach havek, absolutely not, even though it is a mitzvah nimshaches, even though it is a long mitzvah, but that's not what over LiAsiyatan means. It means before I begin, so I'm stuck, and I have to take it before I touch it. Now let's go to Sukkah. Paskin the Rambam in Perek Vav and Hilchos Sukkah, Halacha Yud Beis, the middle of page 5. Kol zman she'yikanes leishev basukkah, kol shiva. Every time you are walking into the sukkah, anytime during Sukkot, Mevarech kodem sheyeshev. You make a bracha before you sit down. Because the mitzvah is leishev basukah. Leishev basukah is sit in the sukkah. I have to make the bracha over LiAsiyatan. Before I sit, I stand, make the blessing, and sit down. Ubelele Yom Tov Harishon. So what do I do about Kiddush? What do I do about Kiddush? Survey shows, do you stand for Kiddush Friday night, Yom Tov night? Do you sit for Kiddush Friday night, Yom Tov night? Schacter Rambam. When it comes to Belele Yom Tov Harishon of Sukkos, Mevarech al HaSukkah, Va'achar kach Mevarech al Hazman, Umesader kol habrachos al hakos. First is Shechianu, first is Leishev Basukah, then Shechianu, and it's all while I'm holding the kos. Nimtza, Mekadesh Mu'umad, Umevarech Leishev Basukah, V'yoshev, V'achar kach Mevarech al Hazman. You make Kiddush standing on Sukkot night. You make the bracha of Leishev Basukah. You sit down. I made the bracha before the Kiyum Mitzvah sitting down. I sat down. Now I make the bracha of Shechianu. Ukazeh haya minhag rabosai v'rabbanei sfarad lekadesh me'umad b'leil rishon shel chag hasukos kamo shebeyan. When it comes to Sukkos, you make Kiddush stand. We know that the Rambam on Friday night sat for Kiddush. The Rambam always sat for Kiddush. The minhag Sfarad and the minhag Rabosov was to sit for Kiddush, with one exception. The only time he stood for Kiddush, because this is like a big deal, minhag Rabosov Rabbanei Sfarad lekadesh me'umad b'leil rishon shel chag hasukos. Why? Because if you sat down and you make Kiddush, it's too late. Midei yashvei nafak bey. I'm done. If the mitzvah is yeshiva, I have to make the bracha before I sit. The Ravid schreit gewalt. The Ravid is just totally unhappy with this psak. First, there's a shtickle, a little tiny Ravidl. The first one, in the second line of Mevarech kodem sheyeshev, zok the Ravid amar Avram loy dayek. But that's like a sweet Ravid. You know, sometimes if you're familiar, the Ravid goes for the jungular sometimes. And here the Rambam, the next Ravid is a little bit sharper. What does the next Rambam say? The next Rambam says, "Kazeh haya minhag rabosai v'rabbanei sfarad lekadesh me'umad amar Avram minhag mekomenu lo haya me'olam kazeh." We never worried about this, that we have to make Kiddush before we sat down. V'hatam ki hayeshiva eina elo al da'as ha'achila. The mitzvah is not sitting. The mitzvah is not to place yourself on a chair. The whole point is al da'as ha'achila. V'chol zman she'eino ochel habracha over lemitzvah hi be'emes. As long as you make the bracha before you eat, you could be sitting. Sitting isn't the issue. Eating is the issue. Okay. What do they both have in common? They both have in common that the bracha has to be done before the Ma'aseh Mitzvah. What's the issue? The issue is, what's the Ma'aseh Mitzvah? Is it the yeshiva that's the Ma'aseh Mitzvah? Or is it the achila that's the Ma'aseh Mitzvah? According to the Rambam, yeshiva is the Ma'aseh Mitzvah that has to be done before yeshiva. According to the Ravid, achila is the Ma'aseh Mitzvah that has to be done before achila. Now we come to the Rosh. The Rosh quotes the Rambam at the bottom of page 5, line number 3, because of our Rambam. The yesh lekadesh me'umad mishum over LiAsiyatan. First of all, the Rosh says, "Uledvarav haya tzarech levarech kodem she'yikanes ba." What, you have to wait till you sit down? You should make the bracha before you even walk in, he says to the sukkah. The knisa hi hamitzvah, v'lo hayeshiva. Not sure exactly how he knows that, because it's not Shechem Shanam Sozano Lehikanes L'Sukkah. Teishvu Ke'ein Taduru, so it's walking in is already a kiyum. So as soon as I start living, I'm already being mekayim the mitzvah. So let's move it back now to walk in. Thank you. The im haya, for example, he brings a raya. The im haya ochel me'umad haya tzarich levarech al hasukah. Let's say you didn't sit down at all. You had a whole meal and you were standing. You still have to make a bracha. It's not a din in the actual sitting. Elovada. Even the mitzvah sukkah he achila vitiul. In Mevarech achar sheyeshev mikra shaper over LiAsiyatan. And the tushtel is tzitzis. And he says, and here he uses the phrase, sukkah is a mitzvah nimsheches kol zman achil. Ubasukkos teishvu perish tisakvu. Spend time. Be there. Be focused on it. Make it a priority for you. And it's a mitzvah nimsheches. V'im kain, mikri shaper over LiAsiyatan in Mevarech achar hayeshiva. Because it lasts for a long time. If it lasts for a long time, so you don't have to make the bracha right at the beginning. Either Rabbi Preil walking in, the Rosh, or the Rambam yeshiva, or even achila. You got to hang out. If you have to hang out, so at any point, after I make the bracha, I'm still hanging out. That's also a kiyum of the mitzvah. It's called a mitzvah nimsheches. And so we see here, like the Rabbeinu Simcha we saw by Lulav, that you don't have to be makbid to make the bracha before you begin. You can make the bracha even if you're in the middle, as long as you still have mitzvah left to do. Same thing as that the Ran and Sukkah at the top of page 6, the Ran L'Shitaso, that the Ran says when it comes to Sukkah, this is a Ran and Sukkah. I forgot to write the word Sukkah. Ha'oseh Sukkah at the end of the third line. Ha'oseh Sukkah la'atzmo omer baruch shechianu nichnas leishev omer baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam leishev b'sukkah umikri over LiAsiyatan. I walked in. I'm sitting. I could still make the bracha. It's still over LiAsiyatan. Why? B'nei sheyeshivasa mitzvah nimsheches. Shelo kedivrei harambam zal. Shehitzrich levarech aleha kodem yeshivasa b'perek zay mehuchosa. So we have now a fundamental machlekes between the Rambam and Chachmei Ashkenaz. Shitas Rambam is over LiAsiyatan means before you start. The Shita of the Rosh Rabbeinu Simcha. Well, here you have the Ran on their side. It's not just Chachmei Ashkenaz. You have perhaps the last answer of Tosfos. It's a mitzvah nimsheches. If it's a mitzvah nimsheches, so you can make a bracha as long as you didn't do nanuim yet. When it comes to the arba minim, you don't have to do it before you pick it up. And if it's a mitzvah nimsheches, sukkah is also a mitzvah nimsheches, so you can make a bracha while you're being the mekayim the mitzvah, not before you started being the mekayim the mitzvah. This is a fundamental shitas harambam, where repeatedly, the Rambam insists that the bracha has to be made before we do the act. In Hilchas Brachas, Perek Shishi, when it comes to Netilas Yadayim, right? So we had that before. When do we make the bracha of Netilas Yadayim? After when Notel Yadayim, but the Niguv is considered to be part of the mitzvah nimshachas. Zok the Rambam, Perek Shishi, Halacha Beis, Hilchas Brachas, Kol Anotel Yadav, Bein La'achila, Bein L'Kriya Shma, Bein L'Tfila, Mevarech B'Tchila, Asher Kedishanu B'Mitzvosa V'Tzivanu Al Netilas Yadayim. B'Tchila, before your Notel Yadayim, Shitas Harambam. It's a really interesting corollary of that. On the left side, in the middle of the 18th century, there was a sweet Jew from Hebron by the name of Mordechai Tama, who showed up in Amsterdam. And the reason why he came to Amsterdam is because he had a Vaila Zeta, and the Zeta wrote a parish on Medrash, and he came from Hebron, Fod Mechagang, a Shlep, in the 1760s to go from Hebron to Amsterdam. because Amsterdam was a center of Hebrew publishing, and he wanted to publish the Zaydas Chidushim on Medrash. So he schlepped as a kiyum of Kibud Zayda. At the end of the day, he never ended up publishing it, regretfully. It happened to have been published within the last 15 years, was not published until then, but he did publish in Amsterdam in 1765, Pe'er Hador, which is really the first collection of Chuvas HaRambam. He found a manuscript in Judeo-Arabic, and he translated it into Hebrew. And this is the first collection of Chuvas HaRambam, Pe'er Hador, Amsterdam, 1765. And in Siman Kuf Daled, the question was, you have to go in a couple of lines. Ma Yihiyeh Hadin, line number 6, middle of line 6. B'shaliach tzibur, asher maschil kodim asher yotzar ba'al netilas yadayim. That there's a shliach tzibur in Shachris would say the bracha of al netilas yadayim when he's saying birchas hashachar, early. And that's what the minhag was. Bekama medinos b'damesek u'b'sha'arei u'ba'orei mizrach. What was the shaila? Now you're first making a bracha of al netilas yadayim. Me'achar ki kvar not al yadav. And after all, v'chol mitzvos mevarech aleim over LiAsiyatan. Oh, lo, do they do right? Is this the correct custom? Or is it not a correct custom for the shliach tzibur after he was notel yadav at home to say it as part of the birchas hashachar? Says the Rambam in the Tshuva, line number 4, amnam, al mashe sha'altem al birchas netilas yadayim v'chayotze, vadai bracha levatala hi bali safek, v'lakach tzarech levatla. Va'af im yihiyeh minhag, ki ein minhag b'davar iser. Minhag is beautiful, minhag is very important, but when you're wrong, you're wrong. It's not acceptable. That's what they do. You're telling me in Damasek and in Orei Mizrach, dump it, get rid of it. It's unacceptable. You cannot make the bracha of netilas yadayim after you were notel yad. The bottom of the page I give you also when it comes to Kedushin. The Rambam says you have to make the bracha before Kedushin. There are many examples of this, of where the Rambam. So how do we understand the Rambam's akshanas, that the birchas hamitzvah over LiAsiyatan means before the act, whereas we saw a ream of Rishonim who said that it doesn't have to be before the act, it has to be before the act is over. But as long as it's shiore, as long as it's nimsheches, as long as I got niguv, as long as I have na'nuim, so that's good enough. So a number of years ago, I read an article in Mesorah. Mesorah used to be put out by the OU of Torah by Rabbi Soloveitchik. And in the Mesorah of Tafshin Nun Dalet, the Mesorah of Tafshin Nun Dalet, which is 1994, there's a little shtickle that suggests the following, that it all hangs on this is my, the crux of the Shitas HaRambam, on the Rambam in Hilchos Brachos Perek Aleph. If you look at the bottom right of page 6, the Rambam says in Hilchos Brachos, he is now beginning Hilchos Brachos, and he begins Hilchos Brachos with benching. Mitzvah saseh min haTorah levarech achar achilas mazon shenemar ve'achalta v'savata ve'rachta. Very halacha beis. Umidivrei sofrim levarech al kol meichel tchila. Not just midari raisa we bench when we're done, but midivrei sofrim there is a berchas hanenin. There's a bracha shakol niya bidvaro. There's a bracha we make before we have food. Levarech al kol meichel tchila v'achar kach yana mimen. And it's not only machol, but it's also reach. V'afilu nischaven lecho lo lishtos kol shehu mevarech v'achar kach nen v'chol hanene below bracha mo'al. It's a famous Gemara in Brachos that the berchas hanenin is to allow me to be able to enjoy the food, because otherwise me'ila means that I am I'm profaning something which is sanctified. It belongs to God. And here I'm taking it. So what gives me a right to take it is that I'm able to, that I make a bracha. Now look at Halacha Gimel, and to me, everything hangs on these two lines. Ukeshem shemevorchen al hahanoya, kach mevorchen al kol mitzvah u'mitzvah, v'achar kach yasel. And according to the Rambam, what's the analogy? The analogy is between Birchas HaMitzvah and what? And Birchas HaNen. You can't make, I mean, it's not appropriate to make a shahakol if I'm halfway finished drinking. When are we supposed to make a shahakol? Before you have the food. Otherwise, you're being moel behektish. What's this called? It's called a matir. The fact that I make a bracha allows me to be able to enjoy the food. Says Rabbi Soloveitchik, the Shitas Rambam is that a birchas hamitzvah is b'toras matir. It's a little bit more complicated, but conceptually it works the same way. It allows me, it gives me the right, it makes it possible for me to do this mitzvah. For me, it's time to do a mitzvah. It's not endowed with sanctity. It's an act, right? So an animal can also chew something or eat something. What makes it a mitzvah? What makes it a mitzvah is that I acknowledge asher kedishanu b'mitzvos havitzivanu. That's what endows the act with its sanctity and with its significance. So therefore the Shitas Rambam, and here's where the key lies in Perek Aleph Halacha Gimel and Hilchos Brachos. The key is that for the Rambam, Birchas HaMitzvah serves the same function as the Birchas HaMitzvah, as opposed to the ream of other Rishonim who say no. For them, the way Rabbi Soloveitchik formulated, it's not a matir, but it's a Birchas HaShevach. I am praising God for giving me the opportunity to do this mitzvah. And that is not necessarily required to take place before I begin. I could thank God as long as I'm in the middle of doing it, as long as I'm kashur to the Maisa HaMitzvah. If I'm kashur to the Maisa HaMitzvah, it's a Birchas HaShevach. So what is the role of Birchas HaMitzvah? And we do Birchas HaMitzvah all the time. And I invite all of us to think a little bit. It's not a formulaic statement. It has there's heft here, there's significance here. Either it makes it possible for me to do this act in a meaningful way, that I'm not a robot, that I'm makir, that I am a Eved Hashem, and Hashem was mechayiv me to do this, and I accept Asher Kedishanu b'mitzvos havitzivanu. And otherwise I can't do it. Otherwise, I mean, I can do it, but it doesn't mean it. Or it's a Berchas Hashem, thank you, Hashem. Thank you, Hashem, for giving me an opportunity to be able to do mitzvos, and I could thank you as long as I'm in the middle of doing it. As long as I'm holding in the mitzvah, I could say, I could praise Hashem, it could be a Berchas Hashem. What they both have in common is a relationship. It's a relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam. And the relationship is fundamentally profound and fundamentally significant and fundamentally central. The reason why we do mitzvot is because we're connected to the Ribono Shel Olam. We're not just doing something. We're doing it because we acknowledge our relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam. I want to conclude with something that I heard from my own rabbi, Rabbi Yosef Adler, maybe 10 years ago. And it's stayed with me all of these years. And I want to leave this thought with you. The question, I'm sure, is a question that you've asked before. And that is that, you know, I think it was, I don't know, it was Mr. Rogers or somebody who would always used to say, it wasn't, which one of these is not like the other? Was that Sesame Street? Oh, you see, I'm already nebuch. I'm been trying to over bottle Sesame Street. I'm so glad that you're still holding. It gives me hope. So Sesame, which one of these is not like the other? And the answer is Sukkot. Sukkot is not like the other Shalosh Regalim. The other Shalosh Regalim, my God, wow. Pesach. Pesach is Eser Makos. Pesach is Makos Bachoros. Pesach is Yitzias Mitzrayim. Pesach is Kriyas Yamsuf. Wow, Nisim V'Neflois, Nisim Gluyim, unbelievable. Unbelievable. Everybody heard about it. What is Shavuos? Shavuos is the Kailas Uvrakim revelation. And what is Sukkot? Sukkot is very nice. Very nice. Kiba Sukkot, so Schacter is Bnei Yisrael. So it's Anani Akavo. They kept us company. Sukkot Mamish. It's so prosaic. It's so ordinary. I mean, it was we couldn't do without it, but compared to the Kailus Uvrakim at Maimed Arsina, compared to Kriyas Yamsuf, compared to Yitzias Mitzrayim, compared to Eser Makos, it seems so ordinary. It seems so balabatish. It seems so poshut. What's the significance? What are we doing on Sukkot? And Rabbi Adler said that is exactly the point. And he quoted an extraordinary letter of Rav Kook. In the Igros of Rav Kook, there's a letter that he wrote to his son, Rav Tzvi Yehuda, in the year 1906. So in 1906, Rav Kook and his family are in Yafo. He came in 1904 from the other side of the ocean. Comes to Yafo, he's a rabbi in Yafo. Rav Tzvi Yehuda was born in 1891. So in 1906, he's 15 years old, and he's learning in a yeshiva called Yeshivas Teres Chaim in Yerushalayim. So the Tata is sitting in Yafo, and the 15-year-old yeshiva Bacharo is in a yeshiva in Yerushalayim. And he sends him a letter. The father sends him a letter. B'ni Yakiri Shlita. Thank you for writing. Appreciate it. Very nice. Now, Ksovna lanu b'ni Yakiri. Mikol prate hisna haguscha. I want you to write us about everything that you do. Mamish leprate pratios. I want to know all the details of your daily life. Ki halo tuchal sha'er kama gedola hi hit an yanu seinu b'cholin yonecha. You can imagine how interested we are with everything that you do. Mamish shivtecha v'kumecha. Be'eza sha'a ata ochel pas shach. So, I mean, do you eat breakfast at 7:30, maybe 8:22? What time do you eat breakfast? Uma, what do you eat for breakfast? You have Wheaties, you have oatmeal, you have sugar pops. What do you eat for breakfast? And when is lunch? What time of the day do you eat lunch? And when do you eat supper? What time? So get them on 6 o'clock, 6:30. I want to know what time I want to know what you eat for breakfast. I wonder what time do you go to sleep? Right? So you're saying Kriya Shema Lamita, Tayir Tzadikal. Umasai Takum, and what time do you get up? Tell me about your room. What room do you live in? The imhu rachok min hachalon. Is your bed is it near the window? Or is it a little far from the window? Wow. Was geht dem man? He throws in Kriya Shema Lamita. But he doesn't ask him, no, how many mesachtas you're learning? No, you're there till 3 in the morning in the base medrash? Are you eating Wheaties? What time do you eat breakfast? Where is your room? Where is your bed? And you know what? The more prosaic, the more intimate, the more meaningful. This is a relationship. A relationship is built on everyday breakfast, lunch, supper, bed, bedroom. That's a relationship. That's the Ikar relationship. What's a relationship between the Rabbanu Shalom and Makai? It's not just Mechap Malachim by the feast and Kailas Ubrokim, and it's unbelievable and it's amazing and the whole world knows him. Mekachtzach and Metitzach. Takes you by the hand, he sticks you in the hut, and he carries you in a hut for 40 years. Now you're talking. That's a relationship. That's a connection. That's a God. That's a parent. That's a child. That's appreciation. That is what it means to be involved in a relationship. In a way, Sukkot is perhaps the most sublime of all of the holidays. The more simple, the more profound, the more authentic, the more intimate. And that's what this is all about. Kol Hamitzvot kula Mevarech Aleihen over LiAsiyatan. Why do we make a bracha over LiAsiyatan? Because we're not robots. We are human beings. We are Jews involved in a relationship with the Boreal, with the Rabbi. And either the bracha sanctifies the act, it's matir it in a way that makes it meaningful, because I acknowledge and I am prepared to assert Asher Kedeshanu b'mitzvos v'tzivona, or it's a shevach. What a bracha. I actually tushtel the Rambam more literally. For me, the Rambam tells me that I have to have hana'ah when I do a mitzvah. If the birchas ha-mitzvah is like a birchas hanenin, so just like the birchas hanenin is followed by it's a varm on the heart, and having a little hot soup, it's a gishmak, I'm drinking water, I feel my thirst being quenched, I'm enjoying it. So birchas ha-mitzvah has to be followed by hana'ah. It's a parallel. It's a joy. It's a joy that we have. And so the rest of the Yom Tov, I thank you again for inviting me to come to spend time with you. I want to thank the Mara Asra very much again for your kindness and your graciousness. Bechlal ubefrat. I wish all of you a freilich Yom Tov and a good gebench.
Did you see the Aruch LaNer about Derek Lawson and his question about the Southern Hemisphere?
Yeah.
So when you tell me Eifgeklärt, I don't think he was so Eifgeklärt. No, I thought it would fall down.
How could people walk in Australia?